So how in your experience is giving feedback in an organizational setting different than giving feedback in a one-to-one setting?
What is one-to-one setting? What do you mean by that?
Good question. I left it vague, kind of up for interpretation a little bit on your part, but maybe I could say in a like a supervisor therapist relationship. That's maybe an example I would give of a one-to-one.
So how does that differ from giving feedback to like teams?
Sure.
Or to larger groups? Okay. Huh. Well, I always like to try to bring in the research whenever I can, but I don't know of anything that specifically looked at that per se. But I have my first just gut answer to that is it doesn't really differ a lot in that the people I have found, typically they don't like to give or receive feedback. That is kind of our default position, I think. In fact, one of my former students, Rachel Ehrlich, published a paper on how to teach people to receive feedback. And that just came out this issue or last issue in the Journal of Organizational Behavior Management. And she kind of confirmed what I suspected all along, which was people don't receive feedback particularly well. And I don't mean like they get mad, which has happened to me on a couple of interesting cases, but typically they just kind of look at you blankly and you don't, and you're kind of like, is anybody there? And so what we thought would happen is you could teach somebody to make eye contact, use affirmative statements, pause, and actually demonstrate that they're listening. The next step of the research, which I haven't gotten to yet, I think somebody's working on now, is does that change in receiver behavior impact the person giving feedback? I think it does. The only way that I know to test that would be to sneak into a supervisor's classroom and teach all their staff to give feedback and not tell them, and see if it changed how frequent they gave feedback, which I might do unless they watch this first. But in terms of just does that change between one person or a group, not really, in my opinion. I don't know if Shannon or Josh think anything else.
Well, and I think typically when given the opportunity, we should be providing more individual-based feedback rather than focusing on either more of that group feedback, because each individual is going to have different things that they need to work on to improve. If you're working on like team level metrics, that's probably a different story, but most of the time we're going to focus on and teach to how to deliver more of that one-to-one customized feedback and troubleshooting.
Yeah, I would say in general, you are still giving feedback individually, regardless of the metrics. Because if, let's say I was giving feedback to this group, you'll all perform differently, I'm assuming. So I guess I could say, we made it. We hit our sales goal. We did the thing we wanted. Yay. That's not really I don't think that's the active ingredient feedback. It's an area we don't know. It's one of the more researched areas and one of the areas we know frankly the least about in OBM, in my opinion. I'm not sure we even have consensus on, where it acts as either on the front end or as a consequence or a reinforcer, and probably some sort of integrated interaction there. But I don't think you give feedback at the group level. You can give updates and accolades, but generally feedback, the value of it is, here's what happened, here's what we expected, here's what we want to see happen, here's how we get there, some sort of a thing like that. And at a group level, that becomes, I think, less effective in terms of behavior change. So I think you're hopefully, now one thing that might differ a little bit between OBM or organizational and clinical is I think it's easier to get metrics in the organizational world in terms of if you've got your mission clear, it's pretty clear what things you should at least be understanding. When you get into the clinical world, there's a lot of nuance in social skills is a good example that I think our field's still trying to figure out how to even capture that. Where in the org world, there's a lot of things already outside of OBM that have kind of identified these are the things we need to be, posting to our shareholders or to our upstream reports. So I think I kind of rambled a bit, but I'm not sure there's a lot of difference in how you do it because you're still going to likely be doing it with a person. Is kind of my experience, at least from what I've seen.
Maybe I can clarify, because I think Shannon and Josh made a good thing. But when I'm talking about groups, typically I don't like get on the PA system and tell everybody they've done a good job. Typically, if I need to get a message to many people, I tell their supervisors. And so it's like in a lot, there's cascading feedback in a lot of good organizations, right? So it goes from me at the top on down, and so it filters out. So hopefully it actually ends up closer to what Shannon was describing of a supervisor giving feedback. The end of the chain is to individual people, ideally.
Thanks, guys. That was a really good comprehensive answer to that one.